So 5 Blinks, they are a team that sort of focuses around the Arcane Mage, and the Discipline Priest Volt's playing the Arcane Mage. He's sort of specialized in it throughout the entire year. He's very proficient. I think he's an excellent mage, especially at Arcane. And they play Discipline Priest, Arcane, Feral, and Discipline Priest, Arcane, and the Rogue. So the RMP and the FMP, and they've been doing a good job with it so far. Sort of new faces to the tournament scene, like I said, and it'll be interesting to see how they do going up against an experienced team like Never Lucky.
Yeah, and if you are reading the bottom of the screen there, you are going to see Never Lucky is going to be the team of Colo. And I feel like when you talk about Colo last year, Sid, he was kind of the guy that came in multiple times and just really messed things up. Like, that was the team that always threw people off.
Colo is the mastermind dream eater. He just comes into the tournaments deliberately trying to go after teams that have done him wrong in the past and tries to get them out of the tournament as soon as possible. So now he's picked up a new roster after getting booted from his old team, and we're going to see how he performs here today.
All right, we talked a little bit about these two squads. We want to hear who you think is going to win first matchup of North America for the entire year. Going to be 5 Blinks versus Never Lucky.
All right, so 4-5 Blinks and Volts on the Arcane Mage. Arcane is particularly powerful against Restoration Druids, although it doesn't deal the most amount of damage. It does have Spell Steal, and it costs a very low amount of mana, so you can just spam Spell Steal over and over, removing those heal over time effects that the Druids have. So I expect Volts to try to be removing as many hots as possible and allowing Formy and Tiki to do as much damage as they can.
Never Lucky are going to start this series off with what I would say is considered one of the strongest compositions in the game currently. Destruction Warlock, Elemental Shaman, and Restoration Druid. It's very durable, high damage, burst, and sustain. Everything about it is just power. And I'm curious to see how Tickle performs on that Discipline Priest. We saw the European ones falling to the pressure of the Druids. We're going to see if it's the same here in North America. Early pressure on Formy. Spell lock secured onto Tickle. Going to be setting him back just a tad bit as we see 5 Blinks positioned back at the pillar, waiting for an opportunity to strike. They have to be very careful of Packrat's Infernals, that green icon with a skull underneath his health. When that goes on cooldown with a number, he's activated it, and he's going to be doing a lot of damage. It does appear to be the case that 5 Blinks are gunning down Colo, a very aggressive target choice on their part.
Yeah, but Colo, he's going to be retreating to center field so Pack Rats can continue to deal damage. So basically, Formy, Volts, Tiki, they want to be avoiding Pack Rats at all costs. The Destruction Warlock deals heavy damage with the Chaos Bolts and has a lot of control with the Fear Spam. So I think it's really going to be up to Colo and Valido to make sure they're positioned well so Pack Rats can actually assist them when 5 Blinks pushes in.
All right, Colo managed to escape the initial assault, but the team of 5 Blinks have held on to that powerful cooldown Arcane Power, that Lightning Bolt below Volt's health. As soon as that has a number, it's on cooldown. He's activated it, and he's going to be doing a ton more damage. He's playing it very patient at the moment. I do like that Colo is constantly crossing the map, going from one side to the other. Whenever Formy gets on top of him, Colo then moves to the opposite side, and this is what you want to do as a healer, playing with a Destruction Warlock and an Elemental Shaman. You want to be in the open so that your teammates can assist you and basically blast the faces off your opponents when they chase you into center field. So now Colo is likely to march across the map. This will make Formy have to make a decision. Does he cross or does he hit someone closer? And typically it's safer to hit someone closer, but not the most effective. But look, Tickle, he's been caught in midfield, and this is exactly what Colo wanted. Now they can free rain damage onto him.
Yep, Tiki is going to be using his Rapture as a response to keep himself alive. And like Sid was saying, Colo and Valido, they just need to run through Pack Rats. He's basically the turret in the center of the map that can take them down. Never Lucky, their objective in this matchup is just to survive as long as possible. Eventually they will win the long game, I think, with the Discipline Priest on their team is not favored against a Resto Druid, especially if the game goes longer into Dampening. It becomes really difficult to heal, especially with the Atonement with Smites. You have to start spamming Shadow Mends, which is very mana inefficient, and then you end up running out of mana relatively quickly.
I will say that Tiki is doing a great job against his composition to manage his mana this well, keeping up with Colo in the early game. If he can have good mana in late game and pump out a ton of damage, as Discipline Priests are known to be able to do, then they potentially have the capabilities of taking down Never Lucky. But we already see they've forced them to cross the map, and they've initiated crowd control. Never Lucky trying to start an assault. Now with a Fear on Tiki is unable to heal, and Formy is getting bursted down, pinned at the pillar. pillar is typically what you are going to be facing a Destruction Warlock. You simply cannot go toe-to-toe with the Chaos Bolts and their durability for quite that long. So it'll be constantly hit and runs from the team of 5 Blinks. They'll make a move like this on Colo, try to get as much damage as possible, but if they can't execute a kill, they'll almost immediately retreat to a pillar so they can line of sight pack rats. Currently, Colo would like to look for a better position. Yes, he's going to move away from the pillar. You do not want to be standing next to anything that the enemy team can use to line of sight your Warlock.
Yeah, for an Arcane Mage as well, you kind of have to spam spells. So if you want to do significant damage, you need to be using your Arcane Blast, which you can use with Presence of Mind, but outside of that, it's difficult to deal damage, especially against a Warlock and a Shaman with Wind Shear and Spell Lock and Grounding. It is very difficult for that Arcane Mage because unlike the Frost and Fire Mage, where you have the Arcane Tree with your Polymorph, you get locked out on an Arcane Blast. You cannot Polymorph like a Frost Mage or a Fire Mage can, and it can be really hard for that Arcane Mage to actually deal damage against a setup like this.
All right, Tiki, he's trying to decide whether or not he wants to cross the map with his team. Pack Rats in center field is likely to get some Chaos Bolts here. Could be devastating as we get closer to Dampening, which will inevitably close the match out as it does reduce incoming healing on both sides. But I've not seen this matchup, particularly in Battle for Azeroth, so it is kind of a toss-up as to whether or not which team has the advantage in Dampening. I would just off the textbook play say that the Restoration Druid does, but it may not actually be the case. There's been quite a lot of pressure tossed towards Colo, and we've only just stepped foot into it. He's still dangerously low, trying to be greedy with his cooldowns, but Valido's backup is going to allow him to slowly recover. But if that happens later into Dampening, Colo could easily fall. He gets caught in center field, out of bear form in a stun. Good setup here by 5 Blinks, but once again, Colo getting backed up by his team is likely to survive. No, Tiki is just going aggressive, landing a double Psychic Scream, and was able to get removed, however, so that means that Neverlucky will now free cast, and Formy is forced to retreat, and this is the hit and run strategy against a Destruction Warlock that you need to employ. But they do manage to catch them in Inertial's Vortex, well placed by Colo. That's a ton of damage being tossed towards Tiki at the moment. Pack Rats gets locked out. Good teamwork from the team of 5 Blinks to save Tiki, but will it be enough? He does manage to squeak around the corner and top off. Both these teams helping their healers quite effectively.
Yeah, Colo in that last exchange, he got a little bit low, but I got to critique his position just a little bit. I feel like he needs to stay in the open more so Pack Rats and Valido can help him out with hexes, with fears, with damage. That is going to be the only thing that forces 5 Blinks to play defensive. If Colo's just hiding on the pillar, it's going to be easy for the Arcane Mage, Discipline Priest, and the Feral Druid to chase him and avoid damage at the same time. So Colo has to be in the open during these situations so his team can counter pressure as best as possible.
All right, 5 Blinks retreating away. Tiki doing decent with his mana, but still that lead is establishing itself for the Restoration Druid. And it looks like they want to make a move. There's the hit. They're going after Colo with that bash. He can unable to heal inside of that. And immediately, as soon as it ends, jumps into bear form. Very important as a druid if you're being targeted to be in bear form as frequently as possible. Formy really just wants to get aggressive, but then he gets caught by Colo in center field in a bash of his own. Now he is unable to move or retreat. Ursul's Vortex pinning Formy in midfield. Tiki is likely to have to spend a lot of mana to heal through this damage at the moment, which is going to put them further and further behind. But Formy seems reluctant. He just keeps wanting to go after Colo, and he's really taking a brunt of that exchange to try and do it. Colo's good positioning in center field as the composition he's bringing needs to avoid line of sights or points of line of sight. Colo going towards the pillar is not the right maneuver. Actually getting caught out of bear form, trying to pre-Iron Bark, which is a nice decision by the Restoration Druid. It's typically better if you can't heal the damage in bear to use Iron Bark, activate that damage reduction, then tank the stun, and then after that you can recover. All 3 members of Neverlucky casting on Formy. Tiki in a spot to recover, but that cost him a Shadow Mend. Shadow Mend is a very expensive heal on the Discipline Priest, and you only want to use that if you absolutely have to, because look at the mana already continuing to establish itself in the lead for Neverlucky.
Yep, Tiki into the full bash. Can they get any damage onto Formy? This is the Dark Soul coming in from Pack Rats. He's getting very aggressive here. Colo retreating to the pillar once again. Doesn't want to be behind there for too long, but you can't blame him a little bit because Volts, if he's just spamming spell steal, it's going to be hard for Colo to recover his HP. But anytime he recovers like this, I want to see him midfield so they can counter pressure. I think Tiki is probably the best target for Neverlucky. If this Discipline Priest is in the midfield, they don't have any magic damage reduction. It's a great target to hit, force him to run away because he will inevitably be taking a lot of damage.
They do manage to catch Colo in that bash. He's unable to heal, getting bursted down, but now his team, Neverlucky, able to save him with some great timed crowd control there once again by Pack Rats and Valido. And we are marching ever so closely into deep Dampening territory, and Tiki does not have that much mana to work with. I don't think nearly enough to be able to actually pull off a victory from this match. He's going to have to find an opportunity to drink, regenerate his mana, that blue bar below his health, so that he can spend it on more expensive spells for big pushes later on. But it's so difficult to actually get a drink against his composition with an Elemental Shaman. It's so easy to deny with Earthbind Totem and Earthquake, so it's unlikely. Tiki instead deciding to go into midfield and get some crowd control and try and get aggressive to kill Colo. They know they're on the clock. If they can't get a kill within probably the next 2 to 3 minutes, it's going to be curtains for them.
Yeah, it's going to become increasingly difficult. The problem for 5 Blinks is they just have no pressure outside of Colo, so Colo just needs, he knows he's the only one that can die on this matchup, just keeps heal over time effects on himself. He gets into bear form when he needs to, never has to put hots on Pack Rats or Valido. Finally, a little bit of damage going out onto Valido. I think this is smart, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to take him down, especially with no crowd control on Colo whatsoever.
All right, Tiki, you've got 10% mana left. We're at 27% dampening. That's 27% healing reduced. Every time a target gets bursted down, it's more and more likely that they will never return to full health. And then things get really dangerous, and you're not going to really be able to recover. So they're trying to position and post up behind the pillar, but this is where the Earthquakes come in. This is where the Rain of Fire from the Destruction Warlock starts to just slowly whittle down the opponents. Any damage is good damage in dampening, especially at 30%. Colo's mana looks good. He's got all of his cooldowns. The entire team really does, and the threat is completely in favor of the team of Never Lucky, as would be expected. His huge burst hits Formy straight to the face. He's barely able to survive that hit. Another hit like that in a couple minutes is going to be his life, and I really don't see any opportunities for them. They've got a lot of work ahead of them. Pack Rats looking to secure the kill right here and now, going for that Infernal play. These Chaos Bolts are going to be devastating. Formy stalls one of the Chaos Bolts out. Volts buys a couple seconds as well. If Pack Rats can get in there and get one of these Chaos Bolts off, it could just take half of someone's health. He's desperately trying to get in line of sight, but 5 Blinks are making it difficult, obviously.
Yep, 5 Blinks. I just don't see their opening in this matchup. They really haven't been able to hurt anyone. We're at 34% dampening and still no damage is rolling for them. I think if they do end up losing this one, I want to see them bring in that Assassination Rogue. I think it'll be a lot more effective. The Feral Druid just can't get out the damage that he needs without being counter-pressured away too easily. Now Tiki almost completely out of mana. It does have the Dark Archangel Arcane Power available as well. So 5 Blinks, they are saving all of their offensive cooldowns for one final push, but I think that final push is all that they're really going to have left.
I mean, they're going to have to think about doing it very soon, but we saw even in Europe's tournament yesterday that it's upwards of 55+% dampening required to take down these tanky Restoration Druid compositions, and they're not even 20% there, so will he make it is the question, really. Formy retreating away, trying to heal himself, realizing that Tiki doesn't have any mana to actually heal him, so he's trying to hold on to it, just using Power Word Solace as frequently as possible to regenerate whatever mana he can for a late stage push, but at this point it's just looking so grim for the team of 5 Blinks. They need a miracle. They need some big critical strikes if they're going to find a kill. They really need Colo to make a mistake. If they can maybe land a counterspell on one of his Nourish casts and a counterspell on a healing, or get a Skull Bash onto a Healing Surge of Valido, if they can get those interrupts timed exactly at the same second, line up the biggest crits ever in the world, maybe there's a chance that they can take down the target in time. Otherwise, this is just looking like a chokehold that Never Lucky currently have 5 Blinks in.
Yeah, it does seem really scary. 5 Blinks, I feel like they do have a chance with the Arcane Mage, with the spam spell steal, with enough single target damage and enough dampening. They could possibly take someone down. Colo will have to actually cast Regrowth. If he gets interrupted on those casts, if Volts does a good job with his counterspell, then they might find an opportunity here on Valido. A lot of burst damage coming in from 5 Blinks. Are they going to be able to take him down? That's Astral Shift and Iron Bark. 45% dampening, 5 Blinks. They're pushing in. Arcane Power not available. Formy still has his Incarnation up. Dark Archangel gets used as well. Maim now on Colo. Valido getting low. If he needs to stabilize his HP, if he can't do that, it's going to be scary, but every second 5 Blinks stands in the open, Pack Rats gets to tear in with the Chaos Bolts and get them lower, and Tiki's going to have a really hard time recovering from that.
That was an all-in from 5 Blinks. They used every aggressive cooldown to get a kill, and they didn't get it. So at this point, they're no longer a threat. This lion, the Feral Druid, is now a little kitty cat just pawing away, trying to stay alive at this point. They're in desperation. They do manage to secure some crowd control onto Colo, but Valido breaks him out with a Tremor Totem. Tiki's got absolutely no mana left. Dampening is at 50% health, and at this point, will he even be able to recover Formy back to full health? It's taking so much longer. Pack Rats, Validos, they're moving in. That's the Infernals being dropped down to rain terror onto 5 blinks. But Pack Rats gets stalled out for a few seconds. Tiki with a well-placed barrier here, protecting his team behind the pillar. Very well placed and preemptive, but there's a Stormkeeper. Valido could do devastating damage. That Sky Fury Totem down. Chain Lightning's flying in. Formy taking heavy hits. Tiki's got nothing left. Formy's got nothing left. He can't even try to make a push. He gets Lightning Lassoed, Chaos Bolted, and ultimately taken down. Never Lucky with a chokehold on 5 blinks in game number 1, and it's not looking good for them at all.
And that's exactly what Never Lucky wants to be doing throughout the entirety of that matchup. You don't need to be lucky. You just use Chaos Bolts, you just use that explosive damage out of the Elemental Shaman, and you just be patient, right? I do think the main question that I have here, Zico, we were in a scenario a little bit earlier yesterday. I think it was towards one of the final matches where, if you're going to play that dampening game, obviously Colo has 100% mana throughout basically the entirety of that matchup when we see the Disc Priest just losing mana. But in dampening, sometimes even if you have 100% mana, you're not going to be able to spend it quickly enough to get your teammates up. Do you think that there's any chance that if we do see 5 blinks, wait for their push until deeper in dampening, they could have gotten a kill?
I think that that's what they tried to do, but I think that they kind of got outpicked here in the blind because Never Lucky, they're playing a double caster threat composition. You have to basically pick your poison here if you're 5 blinks. Would you rather kill Pack Rats and then tank all that juicy elemental damage, or would you rather go on that Elemental Shaman, but then you're gonna get Fear Spammed, you're gonna get Chaos Bolted, you're gonna make it very, very difficult. And Never Lucky, they didn't get overzealous. They didn't push in too much when they couldn't. Every time that 5 blinks were making a push, we just saw Colo and the gang kind of switch side to the other side of the map, which means that everyone on 5 blinks has to cross to that side, and then that gives whoever isn't the target, in this case Valido, a lot of freedom to in this case Pack Rats, a lot of freedom to just fear everybody up and counter pressure with those Chaos Bolts. So I want to see them, they have to get to deep dampening, yes, but I don't think playing with the Feral is maybe the right call in this particular matchup. Maybe an Astaroth would have been a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, we heard that in the cast as well. People saying maybe an Astaroth would be able to help, because what Zico's saying is they create space, and then ultimately it doesn't matter who it is. One of the casters is going to be able to control the situation, whether it is by way of CC or if it's by pressure from the damage. But how does an Assassination Rogue actually mitigate that? We're heading to Dollar End Sewers. Why would an Assassination Rogue be able to break up that rhythm?
Well, there's 2 reasons. Number 1, the Assassination Rogue is going to cause a lot more pressure by himself. If you have that Assassination Rogue in 30-40% dampening maybe, actually with full HP go out on that Warlock, he's going to be much more threatening compared to a Feral Druid. A Feral Druid, he's going to go up there, he's going to apply his bleeds, but he's going to need a little bit of time. But an Assassination Rogue, he's going to go up there, use his Kidney Shot, apply his bleeds, and then he can either Shadow Step back and wait for that Kidney Shot again, or he can stay in with that added pressure. Also, you have the Vendetta, of course, lower cooldown. He's also going to be much harder to kill in general, just because he's much more slippery. You have the Vanish, Cloak of Shadows, all those big defensive cooldowns. The Feral Druid, once you don't have those survival instincts, you're pretty much just going to be a punching bag.
Yeah, I think it's very important to think about that right now. 4 or 5 blinks, they're running the clock down just a little bit. They're in a tough situation. Van, you started to allude to the fact that what we're seeing from Never Lucky, this is something that we expect to see in this current season. It's a composition that is very, very strong. What is its biggest weakness? We talk about the Rogue. Is there anything else on the table, even if we don't look at the comps from 5 blinks, that just beats what Never Lucky has?
I think this composition is a lot better. One of the difficulties against a Restoration Druid, especially when you're a Feral Druid, is you don't have any healing reduction. You don't have that mortal wounds. Warriors in particular, they have the Sharpened Blade, which reduces healing even further. So when you're at 20 20% dampening, you have the additional 25% reduction from the Mortal Strike, and during that 6-second Sharpened Blade, you have an additional 50%, so you can actually take someone down through Resto Druid healing. With this composition, I think the consistent damage will be a lot higher, and I think the Warrior's a lot more tanky, so it's difficult for him to get sort of counter-pressured away like the Feral Druid easily can.
MS definitely going to be great here. We see that in the comp. What do we see from the Arcane? Sid, I'm going to ask you, because we haven't gotten to hear from you yet, even though you're sitting in between two people that love to spam Arcane.
You're asking the non-mage the mage question.
Why are we going to see the Arcane here? What does it actually offer?
I think Volt has just played it for a long time. As Vinny pointed out at the start of the show, it's just his kind of specialization. The thing is, playing an Arcane Mage against a Shaman of any specialization and a Warlock on the same team is never an easy task, because if you get interrupted on any of your spells, you can't cast any other spells because you only have the Arcane School, maybe a Ring of Frost, but other than that, which he may be talented, you don't really want to throw that away randomly if you're looking for crowd control, but I don't think that will be the case. I think the crowd control that Volts will be playing at a box, waiting for Colo to open his spell school with a Nourish cast, blink in, counterspell Nourish, Kleptomania, Spell Steal, all of the heal over time effects from the target they're trying to kill, Sharpened Blade, drop a ton of burst and try and kill somebody down 100-0. And other than that, they're going to be quivering, hiding at the pillar to avoid Pack Rat's damage throughout.
Well, 67% of you think that maybe this change is going to be enough. Let's see if 5 blinks can manage to tie this series up.
I think Formy's going to sit on Pack Rats the entire game. Volts, Tiki, they're going to be doing as much damage as possible while spam dispelling the heal over time effects Colo has available. Also putting Mind Controls and Polymorphs on Valido to slow down some of his damage. But a Warrior is one of the best classes in the game besides an Assassination Rogue at shutting down a Destruction Warlock and actually keeping some decent, consistent pressure on them.
All right, we can see Volts, Tiki, and Formy all hiding at the box. If they go out in the open, they're going to get blasted. But if they just sit back here with their hands tied together, they're just slowly going to get whittled down by these Rain of Fires and Earthquakes, and it's quite a difficult decision. Tiki using Smite here to heal through the damage with Atonement on his team. This is very efficient and a smart decision. You do not want to use Shadow Mend against a Restoration Druid composition, or you will just get out-mana'd too significantly. So Tiki just preempting the damage and mashing out as many Smites as possible before it hits. But we see the team of 5 blinks pushing up towards the staircase like they want to make an aggressive push. I'm curious to see who the target is. Sharpened Blade activated. This does reduce healing, but Valido backs him up. They have to use Counterspell on Lightning Lasso. Now Counterspell isn't available for Colo, and he can spam out Nourish, and that's why this composition with the Restoration Druid is typically one of the best for a Druid, because there's so many important spells to interrupt. They can't use their interrupts on you, and you can kind of play a slow game at the pillar and out-mana your opponent. We see Maledict's committed here to Tiki, multiple. How is he going to deal with it? They tried to make an aggressive push, but now Tiki is stranded without any points of line of sight. Pack Rat's right on top of him, along with Valido. Multiple interrupts being secured as Tiki is forced to retreat back to the box. I can only imagine he's spending a lot of time. Nice Supernova knock up there by Volts, saving Tiki, allowing him maybe to push forward. They've activated Dark Archangel. That boosts the damage of the team of 5 blinks. We can see Pack Rat's taking the brunt of that as Colo denies it with his Iron Bark and Nourish spam. If there is no counterspell for that Nourish, nobody is going to go down on the team of Never Lucky. Volts just has to bite the bullet, take the damage spells, and save that interrupt for Colo. Otherwise, there's no openings.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I feel like with this Warrior, with the strategy 5 blinks is implementing, I think Never Lucky, they're going to have to try to figure out something a little bit quicker, because if the game goes on to 20% dampening, that Arms Warrior damage is going to really add up. Colo gets interrupted. Pack Rat's getting a little bit low here. Do they have the damage to take him down? Colo leaps in with a nice bash on form to slow down some of that damage. Very nicely done. Tiki retreating to the box with Volts. This is Dark Soul for Pack Rat. So normally when a Warlock, a Destruction Warlock, pops those
Spell Reflect,
pops those offensive cooldowns, you want to be line of sighting as much as possible. But I guess if you have a Spell Reflect, you're not that scared.
I really don't like Pack Rat's positioning right now. I'd like to see him go down towards that purple glowing diamond on the ground where that's Shadow Sight Eyes. Where he's standing right now, Volts can line of sight at the box and attack him at the same time. This is not an effective positioning for Pack Rats at all. I would say it's a horrible mistake where he is currently positioned. Formy can, you see how he's line of sighting on the ramp down below to avoid Valido's damage and Pack Rat's damage. Tiki playing in a very peculiar position, though, right in midfield at the moment. I don't think that's where he wants to be, and he's getting punished quite hard for standing in that position. Mistakes being made on both sides. Ticky's going to have to get back to the pillar. He's getting interrupted multiple times. He cannot afford to take this much damage and be forced to use Shadow Mend, or he will just never recover. Good interrupt on the penance. They do manage to bank a couple of Shadow Mends off the back of that. They're trying to force Valido off the box. I would like to see Vaults and Ticky just stay at that box if Packrat's going to give them that easy positioning, but they do tank a couple Chaos Bolts. Ticky trying to sneak away for a drink, regenerate his mana. Valido sees it, pushes up. That Fell Hunter denies it, and now Ticky is immediately going to have to go back to the boxes and start line of sighting.
Yeah, I think mana for Ticky is going to be very important, so if he can continuously sneak away, try to sit down, regenerate some of that mana, it's going to be really important because, like we kind of said, Atonement Healing, which is the healing a Disciplined Priest gets when he deals damage, starts not adding up quite as much when you get into Deep Dampening. You have to start using the Shadow Mends. Now, 5 Blinks getting some pressure onto Pack Rats with an interrupt on Colo, forcing out the Iron Bark. That was actually really scary. The Maledict Trinket onto Pack Rats, taking him very low, but Colo able to easily dispel it and keep Pack Rats alive. But like I said, this matchup is a lot different than the last one we saw. We actually see good pressure on someone outside of Colo. Formy now going for a full fear. It breaks. It gets tremored by Valido, so not going to be very effective against that Elemental Shaman who can just use that Tremor Totem to remove the fear, negating that Arms Warrior offensive cooldown.
Nice Ursul's Vortex by Colo there, pulling both Volts and Formy away from his teammates and out in the open, and that's exactly where you want him as a Destruction Warlock. Multiple Chaos Bolts flying and tons of damage. Formy dips low. Ticky denies with that barrier, but that's a powerful cooldown he may not have access to later on. He does manage to save onto other cooldowns. They didn't panic too much there and overextend their defensive lineup. Ticky's mana is doing decently well. We need to look for Volts. He's the playmaker against this composition. It's basically all on his shoulders. If he can't land a counterspell on Colo, if he doesn't have that spell steal available right at that critical moment, then almost nothing is going to be accomplished for his team, and it's up to Ticky to buy as much time as possible for Volts to find those moments. And then it's basically Formy's job to do as much damage as possible and try not to get hit by Chaos Bolt. But really, the most pressure is going to be on Volts in this matchup.
Yeah, I really like what Valido's doing. Anytime Ticky is pushing in, immediately Pack Rats, Valido, they try to pressure down the Disciplined Priest as much as possible, and it's very effective. It forces Ticky to run away. It forces early defensive cooldowns like the Pain Suppression, like the Rapture for him to actually stay alive. Otherwise, he's going to have to use huge mana on Shadow Mend, and this way, he's forced on the box, and Never Lucky can sort of just sit back and play the positioning that they like.
All right, we've just stepped foot into Dampening. There were a couple close calls for Pack Rats before it, and those close calls could be kills deep into Dampening. We see Formy actually making a swap to Colo, catching him in cat form, and actually denying him from stopping Ticky's drink. Ticky got a lot of mana there. It was good teamwork by Formy to deny Colo's crossing the map and allow themselves to get at least a bit of mana moving into Deep Dampening, because there has been a lot more opportunities for kills from the composition that 5 Blinks have brought in game number 2. That Arms Warrior, very important at reducing the incoming healing from these powerful Restoration Druids with the Mortal Strike effect and the Sharpened Blade, paying its weight in gold. But the weakness of bringing a Warrior is that he's kind of stranded in midfield with 2 Wizards teeing off on him, so he will take a lot of damage, and Ticky's the one that's going to have to deal with that. We do see decent pressure onto both Formy and Pack Rats, but with Infernals down, Pack Rats is going to be dealing devastation, and immediately 5 Blinks retreat.
Yeah, they're going to be running away. Like I said, you normally want to be running away from that Destruction Warlock offensive cooldowns, especially if it's the Infernals, if it's the Dark Soul. It's just too much damage for you to tank. You really can't do too much, so you just avoid all of that damage. You avoid those cooldowns the best you can by getting to the pillar, out of line of sight. And I'm sure it's especially frustrating for the Destruction Warlock who wants to be doing lots of damage during his cooldowns, but teams, they've realized it's just way too much pressure. You can never effectively trade into it, so it's better to just run away, avoid it at all costs.
All right, Formy now leading the charge for another attack towards Pack Rats as Dampening gets higher and higher. One of the major changes to Destruction Warlocks in the recent patch was the addition of Demon Armor, which boosts their armor and their maximum health and makes it very difficult for melee classes such as Arms Warriors to actually penetrate through. And with the Restoration Druid buffs, they are able to just support so easily against melee classes. This is why we see Formy having such a hard time actually denting the Warlock Pack Rats at the moment. But if we step into Deep Dampening and the Restoration Druid HOTS become less effective, then it will simply be a kill for the Warrior, as it's so easy to disrupt those Chaos Bolts. Formy trying to duck around the corner, but not able to entirely. Volt standing on top, but we see some Maledicts being activated here from the team of Never Lucky towards Formy. He's going to trade Spell Reflect to deny any follow-up damage, allow Ticky to recover. They've got Dark Archangel, they've got Arcane Power, and they've got Avatar on the side of 5 Blinks. These are 3 powerful damage increasing abilities, but they've been caught out in the open. Formy retreats away. Will he recover? He does duck out of line of sight. Volts is backing him up, but he had to use Counterspell on Pack Rats, which now means there's no threat for Colo. Colo can have free reign onto the enemy team as he crosses forward. Ursul's Vortex on the blink, well placed there, getting both Formy and Volts out in the open. Those Ursul's Vortex, it's very important to use that spell effectively when you're playing with 2 ranged classes. It's just a great positional advantage to pull your opponents into the open. Colo could be the playmaker later into dampening with that ability.
Yeah, Colo gets interrupted. Pack Rats could take a little bit of burst now, caught into the stun. Dark Archangel gets used by Tiki. Nicely done by 5 Blinks. Pack Rats forced to retreat. Iron Bark used by Colo as well. This is finally a little bit of pressure here. 4 or 5 Blinks off the back of that blink counterspell by Volts. They're saving the Dark Archangel to actually generate some pressure. Unfortunately, wasn't able to pull out the Unending Resolve from Pack Rats, that major defensive cooldown, that Warlock shield wall, but they did get the Iron Bark, which is unfortunately up in 20 seconds, so they need to try to get some more damage rolling. Colo gets interrupted once again. This could be the Unending Resolve coming in from Pack Rats if they have enough damage.
I mean, surprisingly, 5 Blinks have a lot more pressure, at least in this matchup. This is the first composition we've really seen, but there's a spell lock onto Tiki. He's unable to heal, and Formy dips low. He's trying to hold on to defensive cooldowns while Tiki sits through that interrupt, finally able to connect and able to hold on to cooldowns. So it's very important that Formy holds that die by the sword, those 2 cross swords between his below his health bar. He wants to activate that while he's aggressive and take down the Warlock so he can play out in the open against the double casters. If he's forced to use that and run away, he can't take advantage of it aggressively on top of it, but dampening is mounting up, and that's also going to play in favor of Never Lucky. We see that Tiki's having a hard time even getting his team back to full health in this defensive position. We see Pack Rats dropping the Infernals, trying to get a giant Chaos Bolt, but Formy denies him. Colo jumps in to push back Formy. Now Formy in trouble. Volts rotting down. Another spell lock secured, and very smartly by Never Lucky, they're interrupting Penance and Smite. You want to interrupt those spells. They don't heal a lot, but they're mana efficient. So if you interrupt them, Tiki is forced to use Shadow Mend, and he spends a lot of mana, and when he runs out, he can't cast any more healing spells. So that's smart interrupt usage by the team of Never Lucky, playing for that chokehold, playing for the mana advantage into the late game perfectly.
Yeah, I just Never Lucky. I feel like they got really impatient there. Colo pushed in. He got crowd controlled by the Fear because he was playing on top of them, had to trinket, had to trade out his Iron Bark. And I feel like Never Lucky, their game plan is just sit back, play patient. You're going to win the long game eventually. There's no reason to run in, especially when the powered barrier gets dropped. You're not going to counter pressure through that major defensive cooldown. I think that was a little bit of a play error. Unfortunately, they didn't get really punished for that, but I think Never Lucky, they can't be making those mistakes, especially later on in this game.
I would like to see Valido and Pack Rats kind of split up on that box so that at least one of them can be in line of sight of the enemy team. Valido and Pack Rats are playing too close to each other, and they can easily be line of sight. Formy jumps in, tries to get aggressive, but ends up leaping away from the target. Formy could have maybe gotten a kill here on Valido. They're still trying to pull more cooldowns. They do get Iron Bark. They're pursuing for more. They get peeled away by Pack Rats. Good positioning there. They do get Tiki's Gladiator's Medallion to get out of crowd control. That could be an opening later on. Valido just taking a ton of damage from this Blade Storm of Formy. 5 Blinks are trying to make a move here at 38% dampening, but I'm not sure if it's deep enough.
It's too soon, even with Mortal Strike on your team, to push through those Resto Druid Hots. But Colo actually tanks a full sheep. Tiki, in the meantime, getting low as well. He wants to continue this offensive push on Valido, who gets out of line of sight, casting those Elemental Shaman heals on himself. But Formy is able to reconnect. Tiki can't really push in right now. Colo needs to get in line of sight of Valido. Mind Control coming in from Tiki. Valido getting lower. This is a scary moment. The Arcane Mage can spell steal those Hots. Colo has to play catch up. Does have the Iron Bark holding onto it. No, he uses it immediately. Doesn't want to mess around. Wants to stabilize Valido so he can get aggressive once again. Valido doesn't have the Tremor Totem, but unfortunately that fear from Tiki did break, so they weren't able to get too much pressure from that. Valido still low, and this is scary for Never Lucky pushing forward.
Yeah, Tiki the target of choice for Never Lucky, but that leaves Volts and Formy open, and they're
Another
developing
sheep.
a lot of pressure. Polymorph snuck in there onto Colo. He can't afford to make these mistakes. There's a lot of damage. His composition is paying its weight in gold. They're going to nail a kill and finally put a point on the board against this Restoration Druid Menace. Disciplined Priest finally figuring out a composition that they can make work.
And also, I do want to point out, one of the things that you are going to notice there is, once again, Colo, he's chilling in the mana department, right? But it does get to a point where you're not going to be able to use all of that mana when you get to deep dampening. You can see getting into dampening, Zico, in the way that you want to. You have a lot available, but was the MS enough to just push it over the edge?
Absolutely better to play with the MS for sure, because you have that extra added pressure. We're going to see the Warlock, of course, be much more scared in general, but I think that it came down to a lot of mistakes. I don't think that Never Lucky should have lost this one in particular, because it came down to Colo. He tanked the polymorph, well, right here towards the end of this game, and you can see his Iron Bark right there. He trinketed out of a polymorph, I believe, earlier. And he trinketed here, but he had to Iron Bark when he came out of a polymorph earlier. So if you tank a polymorph and then you fall behind, you're gonna need to use your Iron Bark, of course, to catch back up. And then if you tank another polymorph, you're gonna fall behind again. And that's kind of what happened here towards the end. I think it came down more to a couple of individual mistakes there on the side of Never Lucky. I also think Pack Rats was playing way too close to that pillar. If you compare it to the Nagran game, where he was kind of just staying in the open and being the person defending for his Ele Shaman a little bit, and the Ele Shaman was kind of just dragging everybody back to his side of the map. I wanted to see much more of that. But yeah, I think nevertheless, it was a good effort from 5 Blinks. The map helped a lot. The Warrior helped a lot as well. We're going to have to see how they do on the next map. I think the next map is going to be a lot bigger as well.
I think we're going to find out a lot more in the next map as well, because we'll get to see, hey, what are we going to have comp-wise? Was this map really going to be the outlier? But we're going to have to wait a few minutes as the players get ready, and then we'll jump back into this series. all tied up, Never Lucky against 5 Blinks, and we started to talk about the little changes that we see from 5 Blinks, how they worked out, but I want to take it a step further. I want to actually look on the side of Never Lucky. We talk about how strong their comp is right now. Ven, what do you think they can improve on now that we've seen them drop a game?
Well, one of the things I saw during the matchup, which I think is a little bit of a mistake for Nether Lucky, especially because they are going to win the long game, is Packrat's being a little bit too aggressive with his Dark Soul and his Infernals. So what I think is the best thing to do for Destruction Warlock, especially when the long game is your strategy, is use those more as counter pressure. Instead of when everyone's running behind the box and you're not really scared, using them to just force them to run behind the box once again. Like in those moments where you're in a lot of trouble, if you use your Dark Soul, if you use your Infernal, all of a sudden the team can't stay in. You can recover because they have no choice but to run away or they will die.
It's so important that you bring that up, spoken like a true BlizzCon champion, right? Because the thing is when you do pop those offensives and typically try to create the pressure, it's completely, okay, that's not going to
what I was going to say. Valido is probably one of the best Death Knights in North America, and there's a Discipline Priest on the other team. Why are you not playing your Death Knights? So that's exactly what's going to happen.
I do want to hammer it over the head because I love Warlocks, but the thing is ultimately what Ben is saying is when you look at those big offensive cooldowns, it's never a favorable trade to go in as the other team once they're popped. So if you pop it and they can all hide behind a box, you've accomplished essentially nothing. If you wait and you counter that pressure, it's going to be really strong. But now what do we need to see Never Lucky focus on here, Sid?
Target the Priest, run in a straight line at the Priest. Don't take your eyes off the Priest. Keep killing the Priest. If you're dying, use something to live and keep targeting the Priest, and that's all you do. Just keep going after the Priest.
Ease of execution is something that you definitely do want in a tournament, right? And if you have that ease of execution, you may as well go for a strategy like that, especially when you do talk about the fact that you have one of those strongest DKs. But for 5 blinks, now they do see this comp change, Zico. How are they going to try to play around that? How are they going to try to defend their Priest?
Well, the Warrior is going to have to do a lot of peels in general. He's going to have to get those double fears out on the Monk and the DK when they are going in. And Volts, of course, he's going to have free reign in this matchup pretty much. All he needs to do is stay afar from the melees and try to land those polymorphs onto Zach as much as possible. He's going to have a pretty easy time. There's only a couple of ranged interrupts really from that Death Knight that can shut him down. And the Paladin himself, he only has that one hand of sacrifice. If you compare it to like a Resto Shaman who you have to deal with the wind shear and the grounding and things like that, he's not going to have that issue. He's going to be able to just keep hammering out those polymorphs and then try to create his own pressure. I think the main thing for them is pressure Colo on that Monk. The best defense for them is land polys and then try to force Colo to run away from the Disc Priest. If they can do that a couple of times, maybe they can wither down through Zach's cooldowns and find themselves winning the game.
Time to see what Colo can do now that he's going to be doing some DPS, all tied up in this series. A lot of surprises from NA, a lot of compositional changes. Who is going to get themselves on match point?
Nice fear coming in from Formy. A little bit early, but really wants to break up that initial pressure. And Colo actually forced to run away very early on. Ports away, flying Serpent Kick. 5 blinks has managed to find a way to get lots of pressure very early. Colo going to be pushing forward, wants to get that touch of karma onto Tiki, but that being forced out so early isn't the greatest start for Never Lucky.
Fortunately, Valido really hasn't activated too many powerful cooldowns, and that barrier protecting Tiki will be fading here shortly. Colo saved his stun as well, right as that barrier's defense falls, and Valido's going to pull the trigger, summoning in that Abomination, the giant undead creature crushing this Discipline Priest. It's so difficult to escape. A Frost Nova from Volts is able to hold that Abomination at bay, while Tiki desperately tries to recover. This is one of the most difficult compositions of the Discipline Priest to heal through. Let's see how well he can do it. They do have good counter pressure on Colo. Basically, I'm wondering if they're listening to Zico's pre-game analysis. Just play aggressive and force the Monk to run away. You don't really have any other option because your Discipline Priest simply can't escape these classes. Maledict gets activated. There's the stun lock. Tiki trinkets out and gets stunned on his trinket. This is almost going to be a kill, I believe, as Tiki barely hangs on. He's got nowhere to go. He's got nothing left in the tank to keep healing through it, and ultimately will get crushed under the weight of that Windwalker Death Knight. Perfect counter pick by Never Lucky.
All right, it's going to come to fruition pretty quickly here. We know that we expect an average of 30% dampening, but we also know that we don't expect compositions like this. I just want to start out by saying, Colo, we don't get to see him DPS very often. Let's talk about that a little bit, Zico.
I think Colo, in general, did a pretty good job in this game. I mean, we didn't really get to see too much of him. A little bit questionable leg sweep there in the start. I think he wanted to wait at the end of that barrier, and he almost did, but he could have waited a little bit longer. He had some nice kiting, though, when his healer was in CC, and, I mean, they put on the pressure. They target acquired Disc Priest, and they took him down. He looked solid. I would say there's a couple of mistakes on the side of 5 blinks. Here, when Valido gets polymorphed, for example, I think Volt should polymorph the Monk. As soon as the Paladin trinkets out of that polymorph, there's no reason to keep hitting the Monk. The Paladin is going to keep the Monk up for sure. So instead, the Paladin only has that one dispel, right? Keep the Monk, the target that you're hitting, then he's going to be able to dispel him. He can resheep. Then you might force out Colo's trinket that way, or he's going to at least lose a lot of that pressure, and then you can poly that Death Knight as well without having that dispel, forcing out his trinket, and that way you're going to have a better safety defensively because you're playing around that one dispel on the Paladin. The other thing as well is I don't like when, even if you can get a triple fear in the start, you should never do that as a warrior. You should never go in, triple fear everybody, and just go really hard on somebody, because you're not the team that's going to win by being aggressive. You're the team that wins by outlasting. I would much rather see a standard start where Volt goes in for a mass Invis polymorph. The warrior puts on the pressure on Colo when he's already committed to the priest. That way, you're going to force Colo to trinket offensively, to stay aggressive on that priest, and then you can use that fear to give your priest more breathing room. Because I think Tiki, he did a pretty good job surviving, but he just didn't have enough PLs to actually survive.
I think that Tiki was terrified that game. He used a lot of cooldowns before anything really was committed, and Valido saw that, and typically Death Knights just want to get all their cooldowns out as soon as possible, do as much damage, but he didn't. He played it very methodically. He's like, okay, I'm only going to use Raise Abomination, saved Apocalypse to get the kill later, and spaced his cooldowns out one by one, and let Tiki panic and use things that he didn't need to in positions where he could have used later, and tried to attrition out his defensive lineup. Valido held it and just went one by one and was able to net a kill very early as a result. It does seem like 5 Blinks are very terrified of this composition. That's probably why they went for the triple fear right away. They're like, I don't know if we're going to be able to live, so let's just try to do something, but that's not the case. They have to just trust that they can trade cooldowns effectively, use crowd control to intercept, but now we will see Formy going back to the Feral Druid. That does allow them more support for the Discipline Priest, bringing Cyclone in, an extra crowd control effect, and I think that's a smart move by 5 Blinks.
Also, you're just terrified of Valido as well, right? I mean, if you're going to, like, he is one of those Death Knights who can make those decisions like that. I feel like everybody else just does try to pop all of their offensives, turn into Mez for a few seconds, and delete whoever they can. But you see some of these guys like Valido who actually can figure out where is the win condition, even if it is something that's early. But I want to talk about Colo a little bit more here, Ven. The fact that we do see Colo all of a sudden flexing onto DPS, not necessarily in this matchup, but in series to come, how important is that going to be for Never Lucky?
Well, Never Lucky, Zach is a very well-known Holy Paladin in North America. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, Holy Paladin that we have. So having him on Holy Paladin is really strong. Colo, obviously,
say that with Rubka.
I was about to say, what about RC?
What about Rubka?
I said one of the best, okay? I mean, there's an argument.
Maybe the best.
Okay, well,
maybe
it is. I don't know. What's the problem with that? Anyway, Zach's very good. As I was saying, when Zach's in the game on the Holy Paladin, you don't want to have Colo on the Holy Paladin because he's not going to be as good. It's just the fact. Colo, though, is a very good, Restoration Druid player, Resto Shaman player, but he realizes to make this composition or to make this team work, he needs to play some sort of DPS. So I think he's been focusing mostly on the Windwalker Monk and the Assassination Rogue, which are really strong melee. I think the Assassination Rogue can work well with Pack Rats. A Windwalker Monk obviously gives them Windwalker Death Knight, and when they're in these situations, they can just run at a priest and sort of counter-comp people, and I think that's important, especially for a team like this. They need diversity, especially if they want to go into the late season where the meta is going to be shifting.
He's been queuing that rogue for a while too, and I didn't really know why. I mean, also like every week, like it's Monday, and all of a sudden Colo's hitting you up, and he's like, "Hey, can I get in on an M+?" And he's just on his rogue, and then it was like, "What are you doing?" And for a while, I thought he was just doing it for fun. That does happen quite a bit, but it seems like this has been a decision that Colo didn't just make, because I've been seeing him on the rogue for like right after BlizzCon even. So very much thinking about potentially doing that in this season. 5 Blinks though, changing their composition here as a response. What do you think? Is this actually an answer to what we see Never Lucky bringing, Zico?
Honestly, I think the Assassination Rogue or the Warrior would be better. Same argument that I made in the previous games when they swapped over to the Warrior. You need that pressure. Without the Feral, you're going to be able to survive longer because you have that additional hybrid healing. You have those Cyclones as well, which is not going to be dispellable, of course, compared to, let's say, a Fear or a Discipline Priest. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to have that same pressure to actually force out Zach's cooldowns. And Zach's cooldowns is really what you need to force out if you want to win this matchup. I don't think you win it necessarily by only surviving. You have to kind of survive and then attack, survive and then attack. And I don't think you're able to do that as much with the Feral Druid. But we'll see if Formy can prove me wrong.
All right, it is going to be on Formy to try to take away those cooldowns from Zach. The gates are now open. Never Lucky can send 5 blinks home here.
You can see Vault's positioning forward to try and intercept the team and prevent them from getting to the priest. They have to protect Tiki at all costs. Tiki actually pushing forward. Maybe he wants to get a Psychic Scream. He's a little bit cautious of going right now. He's going to go right next to the Windwalker. Very dangerous maneuver, but they do manage to pull a powerful defensive cooldown from Colo. But now Tiki, he's involved with the fight, and he's really not going to get an opportunity to get away. He's going to rely on Formy and Vaults to save him. Both Cyclone and Polymorph quite effective at denying damage, but they're using these crowd control effects before they stun Tiki, which means now they will have free reign during this Hammer of Justice, which Tiki immediately responds to, trades that barrier, having seen Valito mix up his strategy. He actually went all in with his cooldowns this game rather than spacing them out. Tiki's trade is quite effective at absorbing all of that damage. However, Colo has saved his cooldowns aggressively, so the team of Never Lucky still splitting it up quite effectively. Zach is going to get aggressive here with the Avenging Crusader. It's effectively 3 damage dealers onto Tiki. How is he going to deal with it, Ven?
He's going to get stunned and ultimately probably taken down in this moment. He gets stunned, potentially into a restun. Pain Suppression was used. That was the last line of defense he has, but now with the Maledict trinkets coming in, what is Tiki going to do? A lot of interrupts coming in from Valito and Colo. This is going to be so difficult for him to survive. Hammer of Justice is going to be up shortly for Zach as well. If he can nail another Hammer of Justice onto Tiki, I don't think there's any way he can survive. Colo and Valito, they have way too much uptime. There is no counter pressure. It's just a matter of time before Tiki goes down. There is the full leg sweep. Valito building up his damage. Whirling Dragon Punch closes out the game, and Never Lucky will be able to run down Tiki and close up the series 3-1.
Sometimes lucky. Composition's definitely going to pay dividends here. They're going to be able to lock this one up nice and quick. Moving forward in the tournament, 5 blinks, new up-and-coming team. We're not going to get to see any more of them today, but the thing is hey, these guys definitely look like they do have a lot to offer. Maybe we do get to see more of them a little bit later on throughout the year. Obviously, just the first tournament then.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first tournament, 4 or 5 blinks, sort of up-and-comers. I think the compositions that they bring are good, just not necessarily the best in this current meta with the buff to Resto Druids. This one Priest obviously very susceptible to that Windwalker Death Knight as well. Becomes difficult for them, but hopefully they sign up again, and we'll have to see how they can do.
Also, the thing is with Never Lucky, when you look at Colo, this guy's incredibly good at figuring out the right compositions to just really throw people off.
Colo has been playing Windwalker DK and running at healers since he was incepted. Like, he's just, all right, I'm going to run at the healer. You've got a priest, we're running at the healer. So him being able to jump between that Restoration Druid gameplay where it's kind of just passive, avoid interacting as much as possible until a very late stage in the game, and then just immediately switch to let's go, we're running at your healer and bursting him down, I think is very important for his team. It's either he can play both those strategies, and because of that, we expected this series to go on for quite some time with the Lock Shaman Druid, but they can just pull this composition out and make it work so effectively.
And that's one of the things for Tiki. It's like that really shows what happens when you only have one healer available to you. You can get countered out by something like Windwalker Death Knight. If he could play Resto Druid, it could be a completely different series.
Well, honestly, I don't think the matchup is as bad as we saw here. There's 0 sheeps in this matchup on Colo. If you don't sheep Colo, you're never going to win the matchup. It's that simple. You have to tell your DPS to stop damaging the guy you're hitting, sheep him first, then you will force out that Dispel. You're going to have more crowd control for Valito. You're going to have more crowd control for Colo as well. And you're going to be able to slow down that pressure a whole bunch more because you have to go through the Trinket, the Hand of Sacrifice, the Bubble, all of those defensives on the Paladin. You need to play a long game, and they just didn't have the right strategy, and this is what happens.